you're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Future movement leader MP Saad Hariri snaps back at Hezbollah chief Said Hassan Nasrallah over fierce anti-Saudi remarks. Two more militants from the Palestinian refugee camp of Ain al-Helwa surrendered to the Lebanese army. And dozens of families leave the besieged opposition held east of Syria's Aleppo city through a humanitarian corridor to the government-held west. Future movement leader MP Saad Hariri was quick to snap back at Hezbollah chief Said Hassan Nasrallah over fierce anti-Saudi remarks. He tweeted, quote, "Saudi Arabia is a crown studded with good and nobility in the Arab history and a symbol of the defense of Arab and Muslim issues. Some people are experts at distorting facts and blaming others for the practices, civil wars and sectarian conflicts they are drowning in." Hariri also criticized Hezbollah's involvement in ongoing conflicts across the Middle East, saying such conduct does not permit Nasrallah to accuse anyone of bloodshed. Nasrallah attacked Saudi Arabia's policies in the Middle East in line with his regional alignment with the kingdom's rival Iran. The Hezbollah leader also urged cabinet to rectify Lebanon's numerous problems, specifically the Litani River pollution. But he said the party wouldn't accept an increase in taxation and called on the state to find other revenue sources. Two more militants from the Palestinian refugee camp of Ain al-Helwa surrendered to the Lebanese army, continuing a trend of militants turning themselves in after an agreement between Palestinian factions and the Lebanese state last Sunday. Supporters decided to surrender themselves after they received assurances from the Lebanese government that they would be treated fairly. The initiative seeks to diffuse the tensions in Ain al-Helwa and increase the pressure on terrorists still at large within the camp. Hani Najm, a supporter of imprisoned preacher Sheikh Ahmed al-Asir, surrendered himself at a military checkpoint outside the Tamir neighborhood in Sidon. Najm, unlike most of the other militants who have turned themselves in recently, was not linked to the 2013 clashes between the army and extremists loyal to Asir in nearby Abra, but had planned with a group of loyalists to bomb or assault the Shiite Fatima al-Zahra complex in Sidon. Meanwhile, another Lebanese named Khalid al-Rayis handed himself over to the army as well. Baalbek Hermel Governor Bashir Khudur has launched a campaign to free the international road in East Lebanon from political banners. State media says the campaign will see the removal of all political posters on the international road between the city of Baalbek and the town of Riyaq. It is organized in cooperation with civil society group and Baalbek Union of Municipalities. Khudur welcomed the political agreement by parties in the area that expressed readiness to cooperate with the campaign to remove unlicensed ads and political posters. He described it as an attempt to turn Baalbek and nearby areas into a model and said, "Despite the security threats by terrorism across the globe, we are relatively secure and in stable condition." Head of the Baalbek municipality, Hussein Lakis, said that such project is reassuring to the residents of the Bekaa and the Lebanese society, in particular those visiting Baalbek, as the scene of clean and slogan-free streets gives them the impression of safety and trust. Moving on to Brazil, police said they arrested a Lebanese man who was a former member of Hezbollah and wanted for drug trafficking, part of a crackdown ahead of the Rio Olympics. Fadi Hassan Nabha, 42, was arrested late Thursday at his home in Caieiras, a suburb of São Paulo, on orders from the Justice Ministry that has been seeking to expel him from Brazil. Nabha, a Lebanese citizen, had been on Interpol's wanted list since 2013 for drug trafficking. Brazil's federal police declined to comment on his connection to Hezbollah. Just a reminder that the Olympic Games will open next Friday in Rio amid heightened security measures and concerns about Islamist violence following attacks in European cities. Dozens of families have left the besieged opposition held east of Syria's Aleppo city through a humanitarian corridor to the government-held west. The evacuations came 48 hours after Russia announced that 3 humanitarian passages will be open to allow civilians and surrendering fighters to cross from the besieged rebel-held districts of the city to government territory. It also said a number of women over the age of 40 had left the rebel-held east and had been taken to shelters. Central Intelligence Agency Director John Brennan says he is not optimistic about the future of Syria. His comments were a rare public acknowledgement by a top U.S. official that Syria may not survive a 5-year civil war now in its current state.
We need to be able to have some sense that Assad is on the way out. There can be a transition period, but it needs to be clear that he is not part of Syria's future. Until that happens, until there is at least the beginning or the acknowledgement of that transition, you're going to have Syrians dying, continue to die, because many of them are trying to reclaim that country for the good of Syria's future, but many of them also want Syria to be the safe haven for terrorists. So I don't know whether or not Syria can be put back together again, whether it's going to be some type of confederal structure where the various confessional groups are going to have the lead in governing their portions of the country. We've looked at the different parts of the country and which ones could be self-sustaining, which ones would rely so much on sort of external assistance. Most of the people in Syria are in that western spine of the country. The large portions of the eastern part of the Syria are desert and limited urban centers. So I don't think also you're going to be able to have some semblance of tranquility in Syria until you're also able to address the Iraq issue. And that's why I think this administration, President Obama, gets a lot of credit for trying to look at what we need to do in both countries so that what we're doing is going to be complementary to this effort.
Coming up next, Donald Trump says he's taking the gloves off in the campaign against Hillary Clinton. Stay tuned. Welcome back. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has condemned Western countries for failing to show solidarity with Turkey over the recent failed coup, saying those who worried over the fate of coup supporters instead of Turkish democracy could not be friends of Ankara. Erdogan also rejected Western criticism of purges underway in Turkey's military and other state institutions, which saw more than 60,000 people detained, removed or suspended over suspected links with the coup attempt, suggesting some in the United States were on the side of the plotters. The purges have targeted supporters of U.S.-based Muslim cleric Fethullah Gulen, accused by Ankara of masterminding the July 15-16 failed coup. But Erdogan's critics say he is using the measures to crack down on any dissent. Erdogan also criticized the European Council and the European Union, which Turkey aspires to be a part of, for their failure to pay a visit to offer condolences, saying their criticism was shameful. Still in Turkey, Turkish military officials say the army has killed 35 Kurdish fighters after they attempted to storm a military base in the southeastern province of Hakkari. The early morning attack came just hours after clashes in Hakkari between Turkish troops and fighters from the Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as the PKK. They said the fighters attempted to take the base in 3 different groups, but were spotted by aerial reconnaissance. An air operation was subsequently launched, reportedly killing 23 fighters. The Yemeni government says it is pulling out of UN-sponsored talks in Kuwait after 4 months of negotiations. The announcement comes after Houthi fighters and former President Ali Abdullah Saleh said they would form a coalition administration. The Houthis' Revolutionary Committee and Saleh's GPC party have formed a 10-member Supreme Council, which is being seen as an attempt to legitimize Houthi rule. The group is supposed to manage all political, military, economic, and administrative affairs. This would mean an end to UN-brokered talks in Kuwait, which have been underway since April. Moving on to Armenia, police have exchanged gunfire with an armed pro-opposition group holding hostages for a 12th day and clashed with thousands of protesters supporting the hostage takers. Several protesters were wounded in the skirmishes near the police building in Yerevan, Armenia's capital, where the hostages have been held since July 17th. Radio Liberty, a U.S.-funded broadcaster, said police beat some of its journalists with truncheons and damaged their equipment. Police say 3 of the armed men were wounded during an earlier shootout on Friday, with 2 taken to hospital under armed guard. Now for some U.S. election news, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump said he was taking the gloves off after Democratic rival Hillary Clinton's speech at the Democratic National Convention. Clinton's history-making speech attracted a smaller U.S. television audience than rival Donald Trump's address a week earlier, according to Nielsen ratings data released.
But I watched her last night giving a speech that was so average. And I watched last night as the network said, it was all right, it was good, it was fine. And then I watched this morning. It was unbelievable. It was so wonderful. It wasn't wonderful, folks. Thursday to Thursday, that's the big one, right? Thursday. We beat her by millions on television. By millions. Millions! We beat her by a lot. And they both did good. Really, we beat her by a lot. But honestly, the numbers were incredible. Which tells you, isn't it good to have Trump running for the presidency? I've been nice. But after watching that performance last night, such lies, I don't have to be so nice anymore. I'm taking the gloves off, right? Yes? Take the gloves off. Take the gloves. Right? Taking the gloves off. Just remember this. Trump is going to be no more Mr. Nice Guy. Tell Hillary I'm not going to be nice anymore. I've been very nice to her. And I think you tuned in out of curiosity with her. Most people of you, I was actually more curious. I was curious to see whether she'd do a class act and not mention my name.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Future Movement leader MP Saad Hariri snaps back at Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah over fierce anti-Saudi remarks. 2 more militants from the Palestinian refugee camp Ain al-Helwi surrender to the Lebanese army. And dozens of families leave the besieged opposition-held east of Syria's Aleppo city through a humanitarian corridor to the government-held west. Those are your headlines in English for this Saturday. I'm Linda Samim, and I thank you all for watching.